You know how it is with statesmen around the world. They're always remembered for something they might have said, regardless of what else they did to change the course of history. No rest for the wicked could no doubt have been applied to the sayings of Joseph Stalin, whilst no paint, no gain could have been attributed to that infamous interior decorator from Braunau, Herr Adolf Hitler. You're not a real man if you have not climbed the Great Wall of China. Now that is something that can be attributed to Mao Zedong, the great helmsman. And being a true man in every sense of the word, I thought it was about time I went to pay another visit. The Great Wall of China was actually started around 220 BC during the Qin dynasty, when China was unified for the first time under Emperor Qin Shi Huang. The impending threat of Genghis Khan during the Jin dynasty in the 12th century spurred further construction, and it was reinforced with stone and brick battlements during the Ming dynasty 2 centuries later. Despite the colossal enterprise, the wall was pretty useless as a defence. There were inevitable gaps along its 8,000-kilometre length, and Genghis, canny mongrel that he was, decided not to be a gentleman and instead led his Tartar army through one of the gaps and captured Beijing in 1215. I had read somewhere on the net that as well as the infamous 919 bus that trundles out of Beijing to the northwest, there's also a train service that leaves from Beijing North Station and completes the journey to Badaling in 55 minutes. Now, it's useful to know a few things if contemplating this method of transport. The first thing is that many maps still show Beijing North by its old name, which is Shijimen Station. And if you Google on the subject, you're likely to come up with so many differing sets of instructions that you end up none the wiser. From Beijing North, take the S2 train, which runs almost hourly. The train is quite underutilized, thus I do not foresee pre-booking is necessary, wrote one helpful soul whom I could willingly strangle. On exiting the metro, follow signs in English to Beijing North Station. Another helpful person who would also be up top of my list of people to be strangled or certainly flogged, as there wasn't a single sign in English in sight. But being a determined soul, I eventually found my way to the station, and eventually found the ticket office, outside and to the right of the main entrance, since you're not allowed into the station without a ticket. I waited patiently in the queue for 45 minutes, and must have moved forward all of 5 meters in that time. Up on the wall, an electronic display was not particularly helpful, and when I saw what I found later were a Spaniard and 3 French people being told to go away by the ticket office, I discovered that not only had we not got a pre-pass, obtainable from a kiosk outside the outside ticket office, to allow us the right to buy a ticket in the first place, but all the places had already been sold for the entire day anyway. And as you cannot buy these tickets in advance either, you could always try your luck at 6 a.m. tomorrow. But true men do not throw in the towel so easily. It was time to tackle the 919 bus, which leaves from Dushanmen bus station at a quick metro ride to Zhishuitan on line 2, followed by a 10-minute walk, saw your hero standing at the requisite place. Now, I mentioned earlier the word infamous when referring to the 919, and this is because there is not one 919 bus. There are loads of them, some of which are express buses, some go via different routes, some stop at every lay-by, and again, they are not for the faint-hearted. The trick is not to try asking one of the officious-looking employees of the bus company, but instead to follow everyone else. The bus with the longest queue is undoubtedly the one you want. It goes without saying that this is where true men, not true gentlemen, have the upper hand, as the frenzy to get on one of the buses is akin to feeding time at London Zoo. Why this should be, I have no idea, as the buses queue up one after the other, fill their innards with exuberant Chinese, and drive off as the next one pulls in. A queue that looked about 500 metres long took all of 20 minutes for your favourite podcaster to find a seat on the bus. A Brunhilde lookalike swaggered down the bus, handing out tickets for the princely sum of 12 RMB, about £1.10, at which point I knew I was on the right to 919, as the slow bus reputedly costs only 7 RMB. 1 hour and 20 minutes later, we pulled into a massive car park, and at the far end the bus pulled up and everyone fought to be first through the doors. There was a ticket office close by where they were happy to relieve you of the princely sum of 45 RMB in return for a postcard ticket that surely would have fallen foul of the advertising standard watchdogs had it been sold in Europe. A little further up the road, there were police SWAT teams standing by in case of trouble. Maybe they were watching somewhat belatedly for invading Mongols. But it soon became clear why they were there. Up through an archway and there to the right was the main ticket office, swamped with eager visitors who obviously had not seen the earlier ticket office or had decided to chance their luck. I smiled a knowing smile, fought my way around them, and headed for the electronic turnstiles. Lonely Planet warns that the mere mention of Badaling sends a shudder down the spine of hardcore war walkers. Following in the footsteps of Nixon, Thatcher, Reagan, Gorbachev, and HMQ, one passes by tacky souvenir stalls and T-shirt hawkers and mobs of sightseers. In fact, you're more than likely to have an eye poked out with a number of umbrellas protecting their carriers from the smog-covered sun. If you're lucky, you might even see a few bits of the wall between the relentless bottoms and puffing bodies struggling up and down the ramparts. Not that this takes away from the grand spectacle, mind you, and the smog and mist might even be a blessing in that you can imagine the wall in its pristine loveliness as you pose in front of one of the long straight sections, rather than see it for what it really is, a long snake of human flotsam weaving its way into the distance. Of course, this is China, so no one should be surprised by the sheer number of families who have come ready prepared and decide to have a picnic on the battlements as anxious tourists sidestep their way around them. Up and down the wall there are classy litter bins that the Chinese are encouraged to use. No doubt the invading Mongols all those centuries ago just dropped their ice lolly wrappers on the ground, as the Chinese were unlikely to have provided litter bins in the non-wall sections. And today's visitors don't do much better, as the majority of bins remain empty, while an army of litter sweepers fight their way through the heaving mass of bodies. Here, too, are a plethora of cameras. How the Jin Chinese must have wished they had installed them in those wall gaps to get a pre-warning of the invading Tartars. There's even a disabled lift installed to help people with wheelchairs get access to the wall, though how they're expected to cope with the endless steps and steep slopes is anyone's guess. For those of a less strong disposition, there's even been built a mini Great Wall, perhaps so tourists of a certain age can still claim to have been on one of the great wonders of the world without actually having to exert the effort that comes with their visit. Be advised, however, that a visit to the Great Wall is a strenuous day out. Not everyone can take the pace, as was witnessed by the sounds of gentle snoring coming from all corners of the 919 bus heading homeward bound and back once again to the stark reality of life in Beijing.